Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here, and everyone's favorite pizza-loving reptile ninjas are hitting the big screen again. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, just hit theaters. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So the old Turtles, they've been kind of trapped in the cinematic sewer for some time now. It's actually been 16 years since these guys appeared in animated form on the big screen. Obviously, there's been like shows and stuff, but as far as like a theatrical release, 16 years. There were some Michael Bay produced live action movies between then, but hey, the less we think about those, the better. So I'll admit, I'm a turtle kid. I grew up with these characters. I love these characters. So I'm just definitely interested in checking them out, and also bringing my kids and kind of letting them experience this. And I do think, although the filmmakers I don't think land every kick, I do have some gripes we'll get into. But I think for the most part, Mutant Mayhem is a success. It does work kind of as a promising reboot for the next generation. So the Ninja Turtle movies and shows, typically they focus on one part of that TMNT kind of name. Most of them focus on the ninja part or else the mutant part. Mutant Mayhem, despite the fact that mutant is in the name, kind of tries to strike an identity by focusing on perhaps the least emphasized characteristic of that name. Seth Rogen, who produced this, yes, that Seth Rogen produced this movie. He kind of revealed in an interview before the movie came out that the teenage part of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was always the aspect that stood out the most to him as the most interesting. And this definitely is a fulfillment of sort of that ambition. This is the most sort of teenage-centric Ninja Turtles that we've had yet. So rather than being kind of like honorable ninja warriors, in Mutant Mayhem, these turtles are more awkward teens that are just more interested in like attending high school and getting girlfriends than they are in fighting crime and being heroes. They essentially learn their ninja skills for self-defense by like, watching a bunch of YouTube videos. So definitely a different kind of more youthful take on these heroes. And as a result of that kind of unique take, Mutant Mayhem is definitely the most like of the moment Gen Z interpretation of the Turtles. I think for better and also for worse, because there's a barrage of like pop culture references, kind of like real world current stuff, like jokes about like which of the Chris's, Chris Pine and Evans and Pratt, which is the best Chris, and then there's just a bunch of like Gen Z lingo, like characters saying, that's so sus, and they always have their phones out and their social media. I do think that kind of, it does work in the level of making these turtles feel like actual teenagers, kind of younger characters. Although I do think that because of those elements, this movie is one that is going to quickly feel quite dated, as already some of these jokes and pop culture references are already feeling dated as the movie just came out. So I do think that is somewhat of like a double-edged sword. But fear not, because there are, although there is very much like a kind of the moment contemporary focus of these characters, most of the kind of the classic, more timeless elements also return. And obviously the one thing that any kind of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie or show needs to get right is the turtles themselves, both like their individual personalities and then also just sort of their brotherly dynamic relationship between each other. And I am happy to say that this movie kind of lands the plane on both of those aspects. The characters are the same characters that that we know and love. They very much do maintain sort of their classic, Michelangelo's the party dude, and Donatello's the smart one, and Raphael's sort of the rage machine. So they do sort of have those, although they do feel like they're more than just those traits. They feel like believable, well-rounded characters, and their dynamic between each other definitely works. They're brothers, they bicker, but they also love each other, and they do have a very kind of earnest relationship with each other. And perhaps surprisingly, April O'Neil, I know there's a lot of talk before this movie came out because that they were going to reimagine her, and most noticeably that she's a black character now, unlike the original cartoon. But beyond just sort of changing the race, the skin color, they've also reimagined her as like a teenager, so that she is now like a peer for the kind of equal for the turtles, which I think it works. I think it gives a different perspective, a female perspective, obviously a human perspective, as she's sort of navigating some of the same stuff as the turtles on more like a equal friendship level, rather than kind of like an adult to teenagers. Visually, obviously this movie's trying to capture some of that Spider-Verse lightning in a bottle. And although the hand-drawn like aesthetic isn't quite as fresh or original or impressive as those Spider-Verse movies, which, hey, no shame there, those movies were incredible, it is distinct enough to be fun and to be to avoid feeling like just a copycat. And arguably, this is the best that these turtles have ever looked. Maybe a quick note to parents: although the movie does emphasize like the youthfulness of these turtle characters, the movie itself probably aims more older for what you would presume to be the target audience for this. I don't necessarily think that it's like, inappropriate for young viewers. I took my two 8-year-old boys; they both enjoyed this and followed this without problems. But tonally, the movie does get a bit dark, and there's also, which we'll get into in a second, some unnecessary language and other content elements that definitely kind of push the boundaries of what you'd expect from this sort of younger target audience. I think kind of the Spider-Verse movies that I mentioned are probably the best comparable for what to expect for this movie, although the Turtle movie isn't quite as dark or like thematically deep as the Spider-Verse movies were. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this movie, there is a little bit. Language is probably where there's the most. And this is just sort of a gripe that I've had with a lot of recent animated kind of kid-centric movies, is just the unnecessary inclusion of more heavy language, obviously relatively speaking. So this film probably has, I would say, about 5 to 7, 8 uses of hell characters, kind of constantly, what the hell, and a couple other swears, like, starting with the letter D, and multiple instances of like OMG or using God's name, kind of abusing God's name, using that wrongly, as well as this some other kind of rude language, like character says, this is pissing me off, or this sucks, or crap, or stupid, or just words that probably a lot of parents don't necessarily want their younger kids to be mimicking. So that is probably the most unfortunate part as far as that content goes. As far as violence, there's plenty of talk of violence. The supervillain, Superfly, the bad guy in this, kind of talks often about wanting to kill every human on Earth, and sort of that's his big master plan. And at several points, it is sort of shared that like, he had already killed some humans, some of his goons, although you don't actually see their death portrayed on screen. The violence that is shown in camera is quite mild. A character dies in an explosion, but you don't learn of the death until after the explosion. The turtles fight with their iconic weapons, although you don't see, and it's unlikely that any of these characters, the goons, actually die from it. And then this, characters get electrocuted and you see the skeleton, or just more standard kind of cartoon violence and action. As far as sexuality goes, this is one that I don't know exactly the degree of it. I do think in a high school, the turtles go with April to her high school. And I do believe that there are some like LGBTQ iconography and slogans. I think on a bulletin board, or not in focus, but they sort of see it in the background. And it was hard just in my one screening of this movie to catch the details. So I don't think it's necessarily something that like a younger viewer will notice, although there might be some of that, so be aware of that. There are also kind of earlier in the movie, there's 2 male characters that are like watching a movie at this outdoor movie night, and it's hinted at or implied that they may be gay characters, although there's nothing in the movie that makes that definitive, and they're just sort of shown in passing, but that is there as well. There's a recurrent gag about the fact that the turtles don't have nipples, so they kind of bring that up a couple of different times. Which, speaking of nipples, Bebop, the kind of mutant warthog, has his nipples pierced, as he has since the beginning of his character, and you do sort of see those pretty front and center, at least in one scene in the camera. And then there's also just humans and mutants have romantic feelings for each other, and then mutants and mutants. Splinter, the rat, kind of has a attraction to this like mutant cockroach, and near the end of the movie, they do very passionately kiss and make out. So there is some of that as far as sort of sexuality, and maybe just other kind of content things. There is one character shown sort of drinking alcohol at a party, and then. I know some parents can be sensitive to the fact that it does show these turtle teenage characters sort of lying to and disobeying their father, although ultimately they kind of work through some of that, but that is in there as well. As far as things going on beneath the surface of this, kind of the main central message of this movie is sort of prejudice and acceptance, which has seemingly become like the standard themes for these sort of animated movies to explore. But even so, doesn't mean that they're not wholesome and worthy messages and things to work through. And the mutant turtle characters are kind of primed naturally to lead into some of those themes. And for the most part, this movie, as it explores that theme, focuses less on like the unjust treatments of sort of, from the outside, and more kind of on like what's the proper way to respond to unjust sort of prejudice and kind of angry treatment, because Splinter and Superfly are sort of the two father figures on the good one and the bad one in this film for their sort of family, quasi-family, adopted families of mutants. And kind of both have experienced mistreatment by humans in various ways, and kind of seek to, they develop some anger and resentment towards humans that they try and pass on to their children in different ways. The bad guy by, seeking vengeance and wanting to punish and push back and kind of eliminate all the humans. And then Splinter by just sort of wanting to not associate and kind of keep a distance and not have anything to do with humans. And kind of throughout the movie, obviously, both of those approaches are shown to be flawed and unhealthy ways. But kind of that theme of like acceptance is in this movie is applied beyond just sort of parallels to like racial prejudice or some of that, and it does examine that on more of like a individual, growing up, juvenile level, because both the Turtles and April, for much of the story, are trying to win the approval of others. The Turtles by sort of saving the city in the hopes that they will then be accepted, and April by being like a journalist that tracks down the bad guy, which will hopefully make her accepted and more popular in her high school. So essentially, they're trying to do, even though they're being heroes, they're trying to do the right thing, but for doing it for the wrong reason. Which to me brought to mind Jesus in his sermon in Matthew 6:1, where he says, hey, be wary of sort of doing charity just sort of in front of people, doing it for the applause and the love, rather do it for the right reasons and let God sort of reward you. So obviously the film itself doesn't unpack that in any kind of like religious way, but I do think that there is sort of some spiritual kind of Christian worldview messages in there that maybe a parent can kind of help their kids work through with this movie. So in the end, I think almost everything about Mutant Mayhem feels like a very pointed attempt to be like current, from mimicking sort of the most trendy aesthetic style, to infusing the story with very contemporary lingo and pop culture references, to exploring the same sort of general themes of prejudice and acceptance that so many other animated films have done so recently. But hey, also think there is a reason why someone like me who grew up with these characters is now taking his own kids to see movies of these heroes, because they're fun characters. They're fun in this movie. And there are enough of sort of the archetypal classic elements that I do think still resonate today. So I don't know if this is going to be like a new definitive take of the Turtles. And obviously some of the language stuff continues to vex me with these animated films. But I do think that Mutant Mayhem does capture enough of that classic spirit to launch these characters into into the modern world. How long they'll stay relevant there remains to be seen, but I do think it is a promising start and a promising reboot. But hey, let me know what you think. If you're coming at these movies, if you're a big Turtle fan like I am, love to hear what you think of sort of this new reimagining. If you're bringing your kids, what they think, love to have conversations, so jump in the comment section, let's do that. And if you haven't done so, encourage you, subscribe to our channel, become a Collider, just join with what we're doing here, live streams, movie reviews, other fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thanks for watching, and continue to collide through World for Christ.